Hello, and welcome back to the Corruptive Khaos channel. I'm your host, Corbin, and today we'll be reviewing the new A24 horror film, X, directed by Ty West.
Farmer's daughter, take one.
I need to be famous, Wayne. All the best people are.
There ain't nobody else out there like you.
You know why?
Why?
Because you got that X Factor.
Right off the bat, I should say that this film does fit a lot of my personal tastes. You know, this isn't just a straight up slasher, like I think a lot of other people have been labeling it. It really does seem to take inspiration and even imitation from exploitation films of the 1970s. I think if it was actually released in the year that it takes place in, which is 1979, I think it would fit in pretty well with the other type of sleazy, grindhouse, exploitation pictures that were coming out, you know, throughout the 70s decade. So really, I think it is a great melding between normal slashers that you would see in the 80s, you know, the big boom in the early 80s after the success of John Carpenter's Halloween, for instance. But also the melding of those exploitation elements, particularly sexploitation. This is a very sleazy film, that's for sure. And if we go to the title of X, that of course used to be the rating that the MPAA gave to films that were, above an R. That since has been changed to NC-17. But also, this does have a lot of those exploitation and nudity elements in it. So if it's the X of being one part of triple X rated sexploitation pictures in the 70s, a lot of big cities like New York, you could go into a row of movie houses that were, right downtown in the cities, and they'd be playing very sleazy type of pictures. Plus, I'd say there is an element of blaxploitation, particularly with the film within a film that our characters are creating themselves, with the character of Jackson, which is actually played by Kid Cudi.
Would you like to come inside?
Much obliged.
I want to be in the movie.
Well, you can't. The story can't just change midway through.
Also, with the exploitation element, I think the biggest film that should be in your head while watching, of course, this film takes place in rural Texas. There's a house, that's pretty run down. Might remind you of Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which in today's sort of zeitgeist gets put in there with the aforementioned Halloween or the Friday the 13th films as a slasher. But really, back in 1974, when that would have been released, I think critics would have agreed that that's sort of an exploitation, really tense, over-the-top horror picture. And it's doing more than the usual slasher in the future would do.
Hello?
Anyways, with that sort of, acknowledgement of exploitation out of the way, moving on to the plot of the film, the content, I think for an A24 film that usually distributes films that have, let's say, challenging narratives, this actually has a pretty straightforward story. We have a group of characters who are going out to make a adult film in the middle of nowhere, rural Texas, and they are renting out this building, this place to sleep and live in, and shoot their film in, from this elderly couple who just lives, in a house, just a number of yards away from where they're staying at.
My wife is not well. It happens after dark.
So I think our younger characters are kind of in the stereotype mold that we've seen many times, especially in these exploitation or horror films. But everyone is doing pretty much the best that they can do with that kind of material and that mold. Audiences are growing in expecting a certain type of character present. This isn't really a character study of sorts. This is with the slasher elements. We want these different types of characters to be set up to later be killed off. So everyone seemed to know what kind of film they were in, what the director Ty West was going for. No one was totally off. You know, there isn't a really comical, over-the-top character when the rest of the characters are taking everything seriously. That doesn't really happen. I mean, you have the nerd and the sleazy producer, the quiet girl who doesn't really want to be there at first when they start filming this sleazy movie. And then you have the egotistical, horny girl who is all for making this adult film. And that meshing of characters really works well. It does kind of remind me as well of the ensemble cast that was in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I don't think that this is necessarily a copy of that. I think just the setting, the characters, the exploitation elements, it calls back that, whereas this is doing a lot of its own thing. And since this is a part slasher film, as I said, I think the kills don't really start for quite a while until the later part of the runtime. With that, I don't think there was any egregious digital workings or CGI done for the kills. It all looked very practical to me. When our killer, who I don't really think is a spoiler or a surprise to anyone, it's set up who the killer is going to be, and the killer ends up being that setup. But with that said, yeah, the kills, wonderful. That's why I'm there mostly. I love slashers, even some of the worst ones.
You don't want to leave, do you?
People's eyes are gonna pop out of their damn skulls when they see this.
And with the kills comes the setting as well. You know, what are the set pieces that are used to create the situations where those kills can happen? I think there are minimal sets used. You know, we have 2 buildings mostly and pretty minimal outdoor location sequences. But all of those areas are used really well to create those situations that we definitely get to see our characters die in later on. Now, I think the most sort of A24 thing about the film is its visual style. The visual style is what gives it maybe the artsy sort of label it could get. I think the usage of the camera by Ty West is really impressive to create tense, atmospheric scenes. And with the cinematography, I don't think the goal was to get a really pretty look. It's meant to look pretty rough, pretty grainy. The picture does look like it has a lot of grain, although I do think it is a filter. I believe the film was shot digitally, but hey, when a filter is used really well in this case, it doesn't really bother me. Another good example would be another A24 film, Robert Eggers' The Witch. That, once again, it was shot digitally, but it has a pretty good usage of a filter even with digital cameras being used. I mean, it's meant to look like a grindhouse, grimy 70s picture. The grain almost gives it a 16mm look, which is, you know, even more of a grainy image, grittier image than 35mm footage, which is the standard if a filmmaker isn't shooting digitally nowadays. Plus the movie within a movie footage of their adult film that the characters are shooting. That is an even more grainy image. It's more of the old school boxy aspect ratio format. That is, you know, a 4:3 or nearly a 4:3 aspect ratio. You know, that's what old televisions used to look like. And with the sort of visual style and techniques, there's really great usage of split screen, which is reminiscent of Brian De Palma's work. You know, and that's sort of to set up our killer. Actually, we have our characters in their building, and then we have the killer away, and it's a really great juxtaposition with the split screen. I wish that technique was used more often. You know, I think Brian De Palma in the 70s was ahead of the curve in using that really well. Of course, really famous sequence in Carrie that is split screen, and here it's used really well. Plus, like, you know, usual handheld shots used really well to be sort of in your face or be claustrophobic, or, you know, give it our character's POV in a way. And, you know, dollies are used great when the camera's locked down. It feels intentional. Every way that the camera's placed and the angles used everything feels intentional, and that Ty West had a vision of how it should be shot, and it was executed well. Although that is kind of a juxtaposition with, you know, actual grindhouse 70s flicks that weren't all that well shot. You know, they had usually a little time and little money to shoot them, and that didn't afford, you know, thinking ahead and storyboarding things, for instance. So for here, like I said, I think the visual style is maybe the thing that maybe could give it that sort of artsy look to it, even if the content within is very sleazy and very gory and violent.
Our days of struggling may soon be over.
Hollywood, here we come.
So this is it. Our own studio backlot.
With that, I think one of my favorite sequences would be a very tense sequence where our main character, Maxine, played by Mia Goth, you know, we have the camera right overhead and she's swimming in a pond away from an alligator, actually, unbeknownst to her. Really tense sequence. I thought, you know, the editing was really on point there. And, of course, that is actually a setup for things to come later on in the film. Not a huge spoiler, I would say. It's just a fun moment to look forward to. Anyway, I think that's about all I have to say for this. I think it does fit the exploitation elements in the sleazy films. You know, I do enjoy, you know, Euro horror and Euro sleaze of the 70s. And it does certainly have the slasher aspects there. People who like those from mostly the 80s. And it has fun characters. It's a fun movie for me anyway. I would say it's less so scary and just really entertaining to watch. But of course, other people might have a completely different view of that. They might think this is terrifying and that it's weird and perverted and twisted, and that might be quite true, actually.
RJ!
That said, I think I'll give it a rating, actually, of a 4 out of 5. It's pretty good. I'd say go check it out. A24 seems to be putting out really, really great stuff. You know, they are like the contrast to the big studio system present. Their films are completely different than the modern blockbusters that are being released today. Also, the last thing that's worth mentioning is that there is actually an end credit scene. Ty West, apparently, when he went to New Zealand, actually to film this, is not actually shot in rural Texas. He actually asked A24, you know, could we acquire more money to invest into making a second feature in this franchise starter, I guess. So there already has been a prequel shot. I'm hoping that it releases maybe next year. And you do get a little glimpse of what is to come in that prequel in a short end credit scene. So stay tuned for that if you are going to go see this in theaters.
One of the boys found this inside.
What do you think is on it?
I see one goddamn fucked up horror picture.